Hi friends,
Hello.
this is a follow-up to a video we did a little while ago on conflict in one's family and how to change that conflict into connection. And this is really about a tool that we learned about from a book.
Yeah, the book is called Changeable or Changeable because it's kind of divided. And
Stuart
oh
Ablon.
yeah, Stuart Ablon. I always forget the authors. Sorry, authors. You're the people who did it. Um, but the concepts are wonderful in there. The thing I love about the book is just his descriptions of the way we kind of are programmed to do things in society and how that just doesn't seem to work. It's the equivalent of just banging our head against the wall and going, well, why isn't it changing? And then we'd say, oh, I don't know, let's try something. How about we bang our head against the wall? In our family,
Go ahead.
we call this insanity. We try to notice when we're doing something over and over and over and it's not changing and the same thing is happening. And it's like, okay, maybe just try something else instead.
Sometimes I feel like there's things in our whole culture, whole way it works, that are pretty insane, and wonder why we can't step out and see. We've had wars forever, and humans can't seem to figure out a different way to do things. And you'll see families that, we'll see this all the time out in the public, where someone is just yelling at their kid is acting up back, they yell louder, the kid acts up more back. And you just have to think, is this just the pattern that goes on and on and on and on? Don't we as humans maybe at some point step out and say, this doesn't seem to be working. Could there be a different way?
It's a really great question, and that's kind of the whole premise of the book. What's really interesting is that the author works with another individual who has developed this program of collaborative problem solving, and they've tried it in all sorts of different places: juvenile correctional facilities, prisons, a lot of different places where there is a tendency for us to come down hard on someone, and instead, they try this other approach because the idea is, and we've talked about this before in our previous video, that perhaps the person who is acting out doesn't have the skills and hasn't learned them. Now, this by no means excuses people's actions. However, if you're already struggling to have a skill and use it, and then you're locked down upon and expected to have that skill even more, at what point do you get to practice and learn the skill?
This is a problem that's rampant throughout our whole current world. Is kids go to school and they'll learn a bunch of things that may be helpful in certain situations, but we are not taught some basic skills in life. And these skills have to do with communicating with other people, with emotional regulation. If we don't learn those things, most of us know as adults, right? Emotional regulation, we have some trouble with, most of us. Few of us find ourselves in a state of calm all the time. We get frustrated, we get angry. We just think that's normal because we live in a world that just accepts that as normal. I'm not saying we don't have emotions as humans, but we don't have to be ruled over them all the time. And that's where learning these basic mental emotional skills, in my view, should be basic training for all humans. If we're going to teach things in schools, maybe that should be one of the things
There's a
we
number
learn.
of things that I think would help us all if we could just learn them from a young age.
So the result is that we have to often learn these things as adults, and we certainly have had to learn these things as adults.
And keep learning them.
We
There's a
keep
lot to
learning
learn.
them. My gosh, yeah, because the childhood patterns are pretty ingrained. Those are patterns of behavior we learn when we're little, and now we have to reshape them as grown-ups and see if we can do a little better.
The difficult problem is that there aren't a lot of people modeling these behaviors and ways of being and helping us to recognize and acknowledge and have tools to see where we are emotionally and physiologically, because the two are married together. And so it becomes very challenging to forge your own path. That's what it feels like sometimes. I'm all alone. Does nobody else want to try this out with me? And so we're here. There are people, and it is great to experiment, especially on yourself. I
So
just said that. Experiment on yourself. in emotional, in this sense.
yeah, that could be. So
I don't know. I'm a guinea pig all the time. Like, I don't know. Should I try this? Okay.
yeah, we do that a lot in our lives, explore different things. And this is something we've been exploring for a while. We've had really good success with it, so we want to share it. And we're going to break it down in our own way, I think, here, because I think he had a slightly different method of explaining it.
Yeah.
And give you some examples of how it's worked so that you can try it out in your life. You'll have, by the end of this video, the principles and some examples in your mind of how they work, so you can give it a try yourself.
So if you watched our previous video on conflict and how to reduce that and actually reshape it, you'll know that the first thing we have to do is have an awareness of the emotions that are going on within us and the other people that we're interacting with, and a desire to make positive change. So we're going to say that you already have that. So now we're going to move forward. What happens when you are, in this case, we're going to talk about parent-child relationships. What happens when you are in that kind of a state with your child where, I'm going to use the word dysregulation, where one or both of you are dysregulated and you're trying to work through something?
So to define our terms a little bit here, dysregulation just means that our emotional state, we've lost control of it and we're no longer able to regulate it. So if we're in a regulated state, we have that conscious control. Dysregulated, we don't. And if we're parents, by the way, even though this is going to be parent-child, it applies to any relationship. Any relationship. Parent-child, you're probably experiencing this as parents. We can become dysregulated. So easy to do. I mean, I feel it all the time. Something happens with your child and you can start to feel frustration. You can start to feel all these different emotions, and they can take you over pretty easily. We all know that for most children, it also happens with them quite easily. So this common thing that most of us encounter, but now we have a name for it and we can recognize it. And this is really important because the very first step in this process is calm. Calm stands for regulating a person. And we've got to realize the futility, complete futility
Yeah.
of trying to talk with someone when they're dysregulated.
So you know for yourself, just imagine when you're really frustrated, when you're super amped up, it's the fire coming out the top of your head. Are you going to really take very well someone's constructive criticism, no matter how well they broach it to you?
It can be the best in the world.
It could be so well-meaning. It could be so spot on. If you're feeling like that, honestly, for me at least, I cannot hear the person. And in fact, some ways it makes me even more angry. Like, well, how dare you try to, it's just, and it's even more true for our children. They're not able yet to understand everything. If we grown-ups are struggling with it, our kids, we can't have these super high expectations until we start practicing. So,
yes.
Calm. I think calm is a great word because almost everybody can understand what calm is. You can have a choppy lake and you can have a calm lake that's still, and you got the feeling. You can have a windy, stormy day and you can have a peaceful, calm day. So it's a word that I think even younger children can grasp the concept of, that we need to calm ourselves. I think the important part here is to realize that everybody calms in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
So one, you recognize there's dysregulation. Things need to be calm, either your child, yourself, or both of you. And from that point, as you acknowledge that, hey, it seems like we maybe want to try to calm down, you go to your toolbox. That's what we use in our family. You could say whatever you want, but we have already talked about what happens to us when we become dysregulated, and how do I, Rebecca, calm down? Liliana has her set of things that help her calm down. Mirabelle's are different.
Mine
So,
are different. We all
yeah.
have these different sets. So, some examples, Liliana works well if she can just sit down and read. And she's accessing
Mm.
that 90 seconds of flushing her brain out of the chemicals, but she just sits down, reads one of her books. That can help bring her back
And
very quickly into
yeah, I mean,
regulation.
5, maybe 10 minutes, it really, really just takes that whole, because I said the physiological system is really, it's connected. So, heart is racing, cortisol, other things are flooding through the system. She goes to read, it's a completely different world, and her body calms down, and usually that calms her mind right down. Mirabelle's different. Mirabelle, in general, she likes movement.
So
So
she goes, runs around.
she grabs a hobby horse and off she goes. She does some running, she does some jumping. And that's not always the case. They have different tools for different times, but it just shows how different two people can be and what calms them down.
It's vital to realize with this regulation that this is a chain reaction that is physiological, as you said, and mental. And once it starts, it just feeds itself. It gains momentum and it goes and it goes and it goes. And so we need to have something, a tool to bring us out of that. Other common ones are going for a short walk,
I like having a shower.
just having a
I
shower,
actually just go in the shower. The water, very calming.
number of deep breaths,
Hmm.
whatever it is. But remembering what Rebecca said is really important, that it's different for different people.
And even for yourself at different times.
Yeah.
Yeah. So knowing tools in your toolbox, not just one tool, but multiple tools. One thing I want to step in and say is that when you're to that point where you see, oh, one or both of us are dysregulated, we need to go to the calm, section of this process. You have to realize a lot of times our little brain, the one that does get riled up, it wants to solve the problem right now. And
Oh, yeah.
I have to be really honest. We're going to be upfront. This process can take time, and that can be frustrating. And might not even take this one episode. It might take you 3 weeks to get to a point, depending on what you're working on. But the point is that, like any good quote training, and I'm talking about training ourselves too, if you spend the time up front, the rewards will come quicker than it seems and they will be lasting. It's like the difference between shifting to a healthy way of eating and moving and being versus a fad diet. Some people, fad diets work great. Usually, it doesn't last very long.
I'm so glad you brought that up because I wanted to actually cover that in the beginning. This is the difference between parents that take their kids out camping every, once a month during the summer, and they sit down and they just show their kid how to make a fire, but they always make the fire. The child never gets to learn how to do it themselves. And the difference between someone who goes and they help their child learn, but gives their child practice doing it. And so the child is learning a skill and is gaining a skill in life. And that can be with starting fires, it can be with using tools, all kinds of different things that parents sometimes will just do it for their kids forever instead of allowing their children that natural process of learning and growing in skills. If we just, every time a kid is dysregulated, we shut them down or we give them a timeout or we just distract them with something funny, we're just doing it for them. We're starting the fire for them. We're never teaching them the skills to do it for themselves. And these are skills that all humans need as they embark on life.
Well, that's a great analogy. And as we've also said before, you can't practice this skill unless you're in it. So you can't practice not being frustrated if you're peaceful and calm. You have to do it in the time that it is happening. And that is what is so great about this, is you can both acknowledge, we want to try this, and you can be a team about it. Even if you don't agree, you can say, hey, we want to find a way through this. And then it's just like the building of the fire. Maybe at first you have to kind of support a little more and remind a little bit more. But I will tell you, when kids learn this, they will help you at times. I have had the girls come up to me and say
Yes.
things to me that are so profound. And I realize, wow, they get it. They see I'm dysregulated and they are offering me, hey, mom, find your tools. It's so, so amazing.
That's it. That's the difference between where we can see parents that have kids our age that are still just trying to punish and control their actions, and not trying to put ourselves on a pedestal here, but having children that will come and help us. In some ways, our children, Mirabelle and Liliana, are more emotionally intelligent than we are
Well,
because
they
they've
are
grown up
way
with us.
more emotionally intelligent and aware than I ever was at their age, or even in my 20s and into my 30s.
Yeah.
So it's an amazing gift that can bring lasting happiness. And it's an investment. When we invest in something that we love, we give it our attention. And when you engage with your child or whoever the relationship is, you are actively saying, you're important enough to me to invest in you.
Mm.
And those investments will reward you. And I guess we should step down. It's just so incredible to see.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
know. We could wax on about that, and I think that shows how passionate we are about
Yeah.
it because we've seen how different it is.
I do want to step in and say that, so in the book they say there's plan A, there's plan B, and there's plan C. Okay. And plan A is, I might get this mixed up a little bit, but plan A is no, you will do what I say. Plan B is the collaborative problem solving, and plan C is okay, child, you can have your way. We are trying to work on plan B, the collaborative problem solving. However, there are times and places where you need to either A, put your foot down, or B, give your child what they want. And those are totally different. But, let's say your child's going to run out into the street. You absolutely grab your child and do not let them run in front of that, oncoming truck. That would be definite do not, and there may be times and places where you're like, okay, I'm dysregulated. So much is going on. And, we've got to get in the car and whatever. Yep. Okay. Here you go. Here's that book that you wanted to read that we were having a little tiff about earlier. We'll talk about it later. So there are definitely a sliding scale, and we're just honing in on the one that we'd like to use most often.
So be patient with yourself because most of us have only learned A and C.
Yeah.
That's all we know. And those are the normal. B is what is this? So making the shift to B means you still might be engaged with A and C a lot.
Yeah.
But just start to shift that attention to eventually have B be normal, A and C be things that maybe come in very specialized circumstances.
The other thing that this brings up, there's so much here. The other thing this brings up is that if you choose A or you choose C, but you've mostly been practicing B, even if you haven't mostly been practicing, but you want to, it teaches you how to apologize. So if you've done something that was so out of character, or you're like, oh, why didn't I use the problem solving together? You can apologize. That models being,
self-growth.
Right. It teaches your child how to apologize. And if you're too lenient or something happens, this allows you to have communication and to come back and say, I'm kind of regretting that. And here's why, because what I really wanted from this was this. And it allows communication and a modeling of kind of a healthy person who can say, I've reflected on my actions and I want to talk to you because you were involved. So the first C is calm. You've got to get there first, or you can't really do the next parts because your system just won't be able to intake anything. So what's the second C?
Connection.
Connection. Oh,
Connection.
Yes.
Connection. We know from basic psychology that unless we have a connection with someone, we have no chance of actual communication. This has been studied in trying to convince people of things.
Oh, yeah.
And you can present all the facts in the world to somebody.
Yeah.
If they don't feel connected with you, they're just going to completely disregard your facts. So don't even bother. You might as well just be talking into a mirror. If
That's a great visual for me. That's what a lot of us do a lot of the time.
I see it
talking to a mirror.
On comments in forums all the time. Like, why are you even bothering presenting information to this person? Anybody could predict that they're going to come back and just say blah, blah, blah about everything you said. And then you're going to come back and say,
okay. Yeah.
See, connection.
I know. So actually what this...
Keeping us on course.
Well, it can be frustrating. What this makes me think of is listening. You have to use your listening skills. And in you using your listening skills, you model, again, how a listener listens. And the reason that what you said made me think of it is because most of us listen in order to reply. Okay. We listen so that we can say what we want to say and say it in the way that will convince the other person. But a real listener is a witnesser. You're just hearing what someone is saying and trying to go, if I was in their position, could I see how they would feel? And could you just hear, just take in without needing to reply?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the first step, is to have the other individual tell you, hey, where are you coming from? Can you explain to me, your feelings, or what it is that's difficult for you about this? Keeping in mind that with small children, we ask small children all the time, why did you do this? Well, I'm a grown up, and half the time I don't know why I did something. So helping them to get into, sometimes it's into your body. Did you have a stomach ache? Did you feel fluttery or nervous? Getting them to start to piece out, because this is the teaching process of getting them to understand, what am I feeling and what does that mean and how does that translate into my actions. So this second part of connection is always asking the other person first and listening, and then if necessary validating.
The validation is a really great tool in that second step, that second connection step. And again, the listening. Sometimes just helping somebody get out, helping them become regulated, fosters a sense of connection, because you have to use connection skills in order to help somebody, give them the space, or make some suggestions, or sit down with them and read a book to them, whatever it's going to be that does both of those at the same time. So sometimes connection is taken care of, but you really have to pay attention to this at the same time, because as you move into the third step, it's easy to fall back into the first one. Because in the third step, we're going to be trying to solve the problem, come up with some solutions. And that's when those emotions can get re-triggered. So if you don't have connection, if you've gone back to step one, you have to realize you're back at step one. You can't force and push things. It's not going to do any good. You, you have to help the person regulate again, or regulate yourself again, and get back to that connection place. So our minds have to monitor and say, are we still connected?
So in that connected place, we're listening to the other person's concerns, or quote reason for behavior or non-action, and trying to get to the bottom of what it is. It's not always what you think it is. And then once they have shared that, and with younger kids or people who haven't had a lot of experience with this, we may have to ask questions that help them. They may not know. They may be like, I don't know. And then we might have to be intuitive and ask, well, was it maybe this? No, or maybe was it that? And then as they give us more, uncover it like a detective. Once we've gotten that, and we have been able to validate and say, you are in a safe place to share, it's okay to have the feelings that you're having. And, could you hear me now? When they're ready, then you can share your concerns. So the point is to take the whole event, or whatever it is that you're processing, and hear where each side's concerns are. Okay? You don't have to agree with each other. All you're doing is saying, I hear you. Would you please hear me? And let's put it all on the table and see what we've got in front of us.
This is a fun step, because often you discover that the problem, you hinted at this, is not what it seemed like before. When we're dysregulated, we can't see problems clearly.
Very true.
And so we might be focusing completely on this is the problem, and then realize, oh, actually, it has more to do with something else. We can't discover that until we're in our calm, connected
Yeah,
place.
if you read the Changeable book, he's got some great examples in there. The one that comes to mind is a boy who didn't really care for taking his dog out, and he was supposed to do that after school. His parents came back, found the leash where it usually is, and a bunch of things that said he hadn't taken the dog out, and they came down on him, and he got upset. Well, they did the collaborative problem solving, and it came out later that he went out, and it had been a hot day, and he had felt the sidewalk, the pavement. He said, the vet said, if it feels too hot for me to touch, it's too hot for my dog's paws. He said, I took our dog to the backyard and I played fetch with her. And then I brought her in because it was really hot. And so imagine being accused of not doing something when all you had in mind was the dog's best interest. So it's very often like that. I'm sure you have experienced that before, where you have come down on someone only for them to flip it around. And you have that, there's this particular feeling I get where I shrink real small and I'm like, oh gosh, wow.
And the magic there is that there's wasn't even a problem, right? We just created a problem in our
Yeah.
head by looking at the situation in a dysregulated way.
So this second stage of connection could also be called communication, because you are sharing your concerns,
Mm-hmm.
communicating concerns. So connection, communicating concerns. And once you've gotten there and you both feel as though you've been able to say what you want to say and you both are willing, okay, let's see if we can be creative. Let's see if we can be a team. How can we solve this challenge? I don't really like the word problem, but
Challenge,
that's
yeah.
how it's used. How can we come up with a creative way that one of us doesn't have to just give in? We don't have to necessarily compromise. Could we be really creative?
This is actually where this becomes really, really fun. And with us, it's usually doing it with kids. And you get to engage in this creative thinking, which is super helpful in all areas of life. Because we all know our our first reaction to something often is pretty lame. But when we can look at any kind of issue in life and get creative about it, we can find angles that otherwise we wouldn't see. And having fun with this, it takes it from, I think, thinking of life as full of problems
Mm-hmm.
to thinking it as challenges that are, wow, let's meet this together. Sometimes nothing seems too big if you can have that fun attitude about it. So we've entered into our third C, which is collaboration. And here what we like to do is to let the child come up with the solution. And the magic of that is you're really allowing them to start the fire and to try it out. And it also allows you to put in another aspect of this, which is that the solution does not have to be permanent.
I'm so glad you said that. You don't have to have the right answer right away. We're not born with the right answers. We discover things and sometimes things change. So it's important to help our children ourselves realize that A, they might suggest something and we might say, yeah, let's try it. We're going to try it with the understanding that it may totally not work. Or we may learn something from it and tweak it a little bit. Or it may be perfect. And then 2 months from now, we might go, that's not working in the same way. How could we change it? One thing that is nice to do with, especially sometimes with younger children who maybe can't go through the order of operations, if they make a suggestion, always to be grateful that they are trying, okay? Even if their suggestion is mostly just to get what they want, they're trying. They're saying, hey, maybe this. And what you can say is, hey, I am so glad you're willing to work through this with me. Or some other affirmation that's like, thank you for not just slamming the door in my face. And then go, okay, let's black through this. If you do this, then this kind of happens. So how do my concerns get met? And then they could see maybe, oh, okay, yeah, that doesn't work. So sometimes you might have to walk, again, especially younger children, through that process of how do both sides, because you can get some really creative, really creative solution. You're like, well, it might not work. But always acknowledging that they're trying and then taking it from there. If it seems like it's going to work, then you could say, okay, can we enact this?
And that is step 3, is we come up with the solution, we try it out, and try out another one if we have to try out another one. We've gone through that process, we've learned these skills, and we have developed an ability to regulate our emotions, to communicate with another person, and to come up with a solution together that benefits both ideally. And it takes creativity, it takes some discipline, some mental skills, but it's possible for almost all of us. So let's do an example here.
Okay.
So there was a time recently with, you were telling me about this just a little bit ago. Remember it?
You did with Liliana?
Yeah.
Okay, so Liliana, she's such a magical being. I learn from her so much every day. She struggles with transitioning from something that she's very absorbed in into coming and sitting down to do some kind of a focused work that isn't work she wants to focus on. She's a very focused individual, but only when it's what she wants to focus on. And so we had an online program that we were doing on the computer, and we were running it again and again to her, not when she was doing it saying, yeah, sure, I'll do it. But then when it came time, coming in, being frustrated, being emotional, and not being able to do this, which was not a very difficult task, but clearly she didn't have the skills for it. And so this was even kind of before we had learned about collaborative problem solving. We struggled with this. We tried different things, the usual. And then finally, we were able, through kind of using this technique, to say, hey, this doesn't seem to be working. What is it for you that's challenging? Because, this is really becoming a place where the whole family is being affected. So we were able to have a conversation with her. Liliana is a person who is still learning how to take what she's feeling and put it into words. That's actually a skill. It's hard to do. And so it was a great place for her to grow. And what she came up with out of all of this was that it was hard for her to go from what she was doing and be, quote, surprised, even though she knew this happened every day, to be surprised that she was being requested to do this. And so she said, if you could tell me 10 minutes beforehand, hey, there's 10 minutes, that would really help. And then she reflected some more and she said, the other thing is, I really need to make sure I have eaten something before I do this.
She has quite a metabolism.
So so it was amazing, and it worked really well. She, it's not that it didn't have its road bumps, but because we had talked about it, it wasn't a surprise. It was okay, 10 minutes, and a couple times it was, oh, really? I know I agreed to this, but it really helped. And she would get her food and then she would say, okay, I'm ready. And it was a wonderful transformation of something that had been really literally, this was what we were doing. And like a whole bunch of A and a whole bunch of plan C, it was all thrown in the mix. And now it isn't always easy, but we now know how to communicate about the different parts of what's challenging.
And I'm glad you used that example because, she has, I feel like she's taken that and run with it. So this morning, she and I went into this exact situation and there was some dysregulation going on. And we hadn't given her any warning. And she just said, just take whatever time you need. And she just took, I don't know, probably 5 minutes. She didn't have to eat in this case. She just knew what she needed. And she
read a book.
Was ready to go. She read a book. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And she was ready to go. And she did it all on her own. So at first, there had to be more structure. We had to be more involved.
Yeah.
Now it's something I feel like today was an example. I could just say, tell me when you're ready.
Yeah.
And I knew it would be very quickly. In fact, quicker than it used to be when we were structuring it more.
Yes, absolutely. And it did take time to get there. So it was a lot of practice. And we still tweak it as we go along. But the nice thing is knowing that we can talk about it and nobody has to feel like, because sometimes different atmospheres give us a feeling that we shouldn't say something. And so that's the point of the connection, is creating a safe space where you really can listen to the other person and they really feel like they can share. And then vice versa. Can they offer you a place where you can just say, okay, this is, my concern. So
3 C's.
Yeah. Calm, connection, collaboration. And we'd want to hear from you. Do you have other ways that have really worked for you in communicating with your children or with others? Because this is our space to learn and grow from each other. And of course, there are complete extenuating circumstances where sometimes these things don't work or you have to do it differently. So remember, it's not one size fits all. Are you all right?
Yeah, just a thorn.
Oh, okay. At least it's not me. I'm a thorn in your side. So you have to find your path, and it's going to shift and it's going to change. But the biggest, most important thing that matters is that your heart is in it, that you are in it, that you invest and that you engage.
Mm.
And I tell you, people know the difference. Kids know the difference of whether or not you're just doing it so you can get done with it, or you're doing it because you care.
Yeah. Oh. Thanks, my friends, for watching, and can't wait to see what you have to say in the comments.
Love to you all.